All right, and we're live. Hey, everybody, welcome to the UFC on ESPN Plus 21, Zabit versus Kattar dissection. And this event is taking place in Moscow tomorrow. And I think it's at 2 p.m. Eastern time is when the main card kicks off. And there's some pretty good prelims on before that. But we're going to get into breaking down the main card. But before we do, let's talk about some news. Just some things floating around. Nate Diaz tweeted out recently that he's walking away from the fight game. I don't know how true that is. His tweet read, "Fuck a rematch. The shit was over before it started. I'm going out on tour. Peace out, fight game." And I would imagine that a lot of this frustration just stems from the fact that, I mean, you heard him in the press conference after he feels like he's getting fucked over by the UFC because after the Jorge fight, I mean, he's probably not going to get an immediate rematch just because it's going to take a long time for everything on his face to heal up, and with the run. And especially like Jorge Masvidal is one of the most complete fighters in the UFC, right? And with the tear that he's been on lately and this resurrection, as he calls it, you got to push that guy forward into title fights with guys like, I think he's going to get the winner of Kamaru Usman and Colby Covington. I know there's been some like bickering back and forth with like Conor McGregor, but I don't think that fight's going to happen. Like I said, I don't think that's the first fight that Conor wants to come back to. I said that on my last podcast, so I wouldn't expect that, but I think Nate is probably just frustrated with the UFC like he has been multiple times throughout his career. So, man, but he's in a position again where he can just sit back and, I mean, kind of wait for things to come to him on his terms. So the fact that he said that, it could 100% be true. I think there's a very real possibility that you won't see Nate Diaz fight again in the UFC. He just doesn't have to. And especially because, like, if Conor wants to fight on January 18th, like I said, we were talking about all the cuts and stuff that Nate suffered. He's got a lot of scar tissue, man. That's going to take a while to heal up. He's definitely not going to be ready by that fight. I wouldn't imagine, at least. And let's say Conor loses. I mean, what are the options for Nate at that point where he's going to get a big payday? I mean, I still think that fight would do money, but not as big as it would if Conor were to win, I think that adds a little bit more to it. So we'll see. We'll see. I don't necessarily think that Nate Diaz is actually going to be done fighting for the UFC. I think we'll see a couple more fights from him, but it's a possibility that he could be. I legitimately don't think he gives a fuck about like hanging around just to hang around. Like, he definitely doesn't want to do the UFC any favors, right? So he's going to wait till if something comes to him and the terms are right and they line up with the things that he wants, yeah, he'll come back. But man, he's not in a position where he necessarily needs to. He's probably got more money in his life now than he ever has at any point in his career. So we'll see. All right, what else was in the headlines? Oh, I saw that John Jones tweeted out that he wants Dominic Reyes as opposed to Corey Anderson. And honestly, man, if you're looking at the landscape of that division, that fight makes the most sense. And think about John Jones's last fight against Thiago Santos, right? And some of his most recent fights. He hasn't really been fighting these big names or having these like, or even if he does fight a decent name, right? Like, he hasn't been like with Thiago Santos. That's not the biggest name in MMA. Like, he had to do something spectacular in order to make a highlight, in order to get some attention drawn to that fight, right? And he didn't. It was kind of I don't want to say a lackluster performance. He went in there against a really dangerous guy in Thiago Santos and beat him still. But he won the fight, and he won it in, like I said, he just went out and won. That's kind of all he did. He didn't do it. It wasn't the spectacular head kick or like this big knockout or this crazy submission, right? He just went out and won. So to me, if you consider the fact that Dominic Reyes is coming off a win over Chris Weidman in a headlining bout and he knocked him out, and Chris Weidman's a big name. I mean, you're talking about the guy who beat Anderson Silva, right? When Silva was on that unprecedented title run, the title defense record, right? So it's not like, and I just don't think Anderson is as big of a name, man. But the problem is that Anderson may have beaten the more legit contenders in that weight class. I think he's beaten Glover Teixeira. Let me pull his record up. I can't think of who he beat off the top of my head. He obviously just recently knocked out Johnny Walker in his most recent fight, right? And he's also he's beaten, I think, Alir Latifi. Let's see. Yeah, his last 4 fights: Patrick Cummins, Glover Teixeira, Alir Latifi, Johnny Walker. And the knockout that Corey Anderson just got over Johnny Walker definitely helps his case for a title shot a little, but I just don't think it's enough because Reyes is one of those guys who, like I said, he just went out and finished Chris Weidman in pretty spectacular fashion. So that's the more exciting fight, not only in terms of probably what it's going to generate revenue-wise, but Man, he's got that undefeated record next to his name too, and I think that makes a big difference. I think that really plays into the decision making of John Jones's team. You got to take like I think at this point Jones needs a fight with a little bit more publicity, and I think Reyes is just the guy who's a little more promotable and stuff. So, and nothing against Johnny Walker or the win over Corey Anderson. I think a lot of people when that fight started thought that Corey Anderson was going to go out and get that win via wrestling, and he goes out and knocks Johnny Walker out, which is not what a lot of people were expecting, right? But Anderson's style is a little more wrestling heavy. And we've seen John Jones fight Daniel Cormier, who's one of the best wrestlers in the history of the sport. So I think people want to see, like, one of the fights I always wanted to see with John Jones was Anthony Rumble Johnson, just because Anthony, he possesses that like one punch knockout power, that like game changing knockout power. And Dominic Reyes obviously proves that has proven that he has that, and he's a big guy. He's a long guy, which could give John's trouble. Like Gustafsson, you saw a little bit, right? I'm not saying that he's going to go out and beat John or knock John out. I think it's a tall fucking task to beat John Jones. Like you got to have a lot of weapons. But I think when you look at, you know, I think it mainly boils down to promotability. But in my opinion, Reyes is the guy right now, you know? So I think that fight makes sense, and I think that's a good call on his team's part and his part to, you know, except we'll see what actually comes out of it. But Anderson beat Johnny Walker, who's ranked 11 last, and like I said, you got a guy coming off a knockout win over Chris Weidman in a headlining bout. So, all right, what else? There's a lot of talk about Tyson Fury moving into MMA, right? And I don't necessarily have a problem with this because if you look at, I mean, the wrestling becomes a problem at some point, right? But I'm okay with it and I'm not okay with it at the same time. Like one of the things with Tyson Fury is that he's at the height of boxing right now and in a heavyweight division that arguably has never been hotter. I mean, you got Deontay Wilder up there, right? Ruiz is rematching Joshua, I think, coming up here pretty soon. So that division is like, I want to figure out what happens up there. And admittedly, I'm not a huge boxing guy. Like I don't know the ins and outs of it. And there's so many goddamn belts and organizations. I can't keep track of it all, right? So I don't know who ends up fighting who or how that stuff comes to fruition. But just with the state of boxing right now, I would prefer to see Tyson Fury stick in boxing. Not that he can't make it in MMA. Like I think if you look at like a fight with Francis Ngannou, like if Tyson Fury were to fight him, I mean, Ngannou's not exactly a wrestling prodigy. He's just got crazy knockout power. But the question would be like, if you go in with an expert boxer like Tyson Fury and you're leaning on that knockout power and those ferocious punches, if he knows how to deal with that and bob and weave and get out of the way and counter, he could give like a guy like Francis Ngannou a lot of trouble who's at the top of the heavyweight division. So the problem though becomes like, Francis, at least he's been ingrained into MMA and he at least has exposure to the wrestling and to the grappling and to the clinch work, right? Like that would be boxing doesn't have that to the degree that something like Muay Thai or Muay Thai would, right? So it's a tough transition if he's got to fight somebody like Stipe or like a Daniel Cormier who can just take him down and hold him down there. Like it's going to be hard for him to develop the skills to get off his back against elite level wrestlers and elite level mixed martial artists at the top of the game. I think there are a couple matchups that he could do well in. I really do. I think there's some guys in the UFC that Tyson Fury could probably beat just because he's so big. And if you can keep guys off of you and keep your space with your hands and stuff, you can do some real work. But all in all, man, I just prefer, like, I think he's one of the best, maybe the best heavyweight boxer in the world. So I'd like to see him finish business there before he comes over. But if he does, man, there's 100% chance that I'm going to fucking tune in and watch. It's Tyson goddamn Fury. So if he decides to make the move, I'll be invested in it. I want to see what happens. But I'd really prefer to see him. He makes boxing great. You know what I mean? And that matchup with like Deontay Wilder, like I hope a rematch happens with that. You know, it's just, you want to see him stick in his lane and clean out the heavyweights if that's what, or see what develops. You know what I mean? So we'll see. And next, Logan Paul and KSI have a rematch, I think tomorrow night, and it's going to be hosted on DAZN. And I didn't watch the first fight, but I've been watching, like, I've seen clips of, like, granted, KSI was throwing the same combo over and over again, but I think I'm not positive. I'm not like, I don't keep up with like YouTube culture, like internet culture enough to know like exactly what the fuck's going on, like why they have beef. I don't know any of that, but I did see a video of KSI hitting pads, and his pad work is legit. Like I said, he was throwing the same combo over and over and over again, right? But he's got fast hands, man, and it's smooth, it's legit. And Logan Paul said that if he ends up winning the fight, he's gonna ask Dana White for a UFC shot, like a shot to fight in the UFC. And when I first read that, I was like, this is fucking crazy. Like, it makes no fucking sense. He's going to get his ass beat. But then I found out that, first off, let me say this. It looks like both of these guys are legitimately training. Not only that, though, they are massive superstars, especially, like I said, in the world of the internet. Like, they're huge there, and they're polarizing figures, like especially Logan Paul, his brother, on Disney, blah, 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 all that shit, right? Look at me saying I don't know anything, and I know some of it, right? But the thing, like, I looked it up, and Logan Paul, I've watched some of his clips. He has legit wrestling skills. He placed like 5th place in states in Ohio when he was in high school, which is, I mean, at that level, you're probably going to be able to go D1. Like, I don't know what he did, if he went to college or anything, or wrestled in college at all, but like, Ohio is a very good state for wrestling. So to place 5th in states, like, you know what you're doing. And I'm not saying that he's going to go in and make this immediate impact in the UFC or get this crazy win, but I'll tell you what, he has a better argument to fight in the UFC than CM Punk does. And CM Punk got 2 UFC fights. You know what I mean? And he looked terrible in both of them. When he's hitting pads, he looks like he has no idea what he's doing. He has like no understanding of the groundwork. So, I mean, if you're going to let a superstar like that in based off of his WWE resume and the following there, if Logan Paul goes out and puts on a performance and looks decent throwing his hands around, I don't think it's out of the realm of possibility that he gets to fight in UFC or like an organization like Bellator. I mean, he's got legit wrestling experience, and like so when you first start doing jiu-jitsu, right? If you go up against a wrestler, you are going to get fucking smashed. Like, if you don't know anything, and then there's like a point of diminishing returns, right? Like, I was doing it for a few years, and then I went against a wrestler who hadn't done jiu-jitsu, and I was able to, like, you know, kind of ball them up and put them, because you're fighting off your back, and that's not the point of wrestling. They're not used to that. But then if you got someone who actually practices jiu-jitsu and has that wrestling background in their pocket, like, they can pull that out. The pressure that they're able to put on people on top is legit, man. Like, I don't know who his opponent would be in an MMA fight, but I'm telling you, he's got a better chance at winning it than CM Punk ever did. So don't be surprised if something actually materializes out of this. And just the draw that you would get to that card because of his name would be, I mean, massive. It would be an incredible, like, show. I'm sure you would get a ton of viewers just to watch Logan Paul fight. So we'll see what develops there. I might actually tune in and watch this. I just want to see what he looks like. I want to see how well he throws his hands around and stuff. And like I said, if so, and he's got that wrestling background, he wants to make a transition to MMA. We live in the day of the internet, man. Don't be surprised if shit like that happens. But let's move on to breaking these fights down on the main card. And your first fight is going to be a light heavyweight bout between Klidson Abreu and Shamil Gamzatov. Now, remember, this fight is taking place in Moscow. So there are Russians in every single one of the fights on the main card. So it'll be evident by which ones they are by how bad I fuck their names up. Like, if you notice me fucking their names up, it's most likely a Russian name, right? But Klidson Abreu is coming off a unanimous decision win over Sam Alvey. He utilizes that push kick really well. He did it in the Sam Alvey fight. But there were moments where, like, his specialty is grappling, right? Like, I think he has 10 submission wins on his record. And I'm pretty sure he's a black belt. But he would get into and Sam Alvey's a vet, man. I mean, he's a true veteran of the sport, and he's a tough guy. Like, he's not a gimme fight by any means. But he did get certain positions reversed. He'll end up on the bottom sometimes. So, like, a lot of the times you see this, so, like, sometimes that jiu-jitsu doesn't all carry over, especially at the larger weight classes when you got big guys who are able to manipulate you and, like, dig underhooks, and, you know, they're just bigger and stronger. It's hard to implement sometimes. So keep that in mind. Keep in mind that although he's very credentialed on the ground and has a lot of submission wins, Alvey was able to gain position on him sometimes. And when he fought Magomed Ankalaev in the fight before that, he was controlled on the ground a lot. You know, I mean, like, there wasn't really any moments where Klidson had a glaring advantage over Magomed Ankalaev. So keep that in mind as well, right? I've only got really 2 fights that I was able to watch on Klidson Abreu. Some of these early ones are going to be tough to break down just because I don't have data. Like, it's so hard to find so many of these fights. But Shamil Gamzatov, His most recent win was in the PFL over Rex Harris, but that was in 2018. So he's coming off over a year layoff now. And I mean, he's a guy who I couldn't find any fights for, but I could find highlights. And his hands look okay, right? He throws some combos together well, but he has also, I got to look up how many knockouts this guy has. I just had it pulled up. Give me 1 second. 5 knockouts, 5 submissions, 3 decisions. And I read an article somewhere when I was trying to like figure stuff out about this guy that said that they were giving him like a C rating. It could probably be an easy fight for Klidson Abreu. But man, after seeing that with Sam Alvey, right, I disagree, because one of the things about Shamil Gamzatov is he's undefeated, right? So I think he had like a close fight with Rodney Wallace. It was a split decision, but he's managed to pull it off in all of his fights so far. And he was born in Dagestan, right? Anytime you're born in Dagestan, I give you a little bit of a, you're a tough motherfucker. I'll give you that every time. But also this guy has competed in won in several grappling competitions, including like Abu Dhabi, right? He's got experience with combat sambo. So I think that Klidson Abreu is going to have a tough time in controlling or gaining an advantageous position of Shamil on the ground. Just because, like I said, if you consider the fact that Shamil is a champion and actually has legit grappling experience, and combat sambo is one of the most effective forms of fighting. Like, look at Habib. I mean, right, the way he implements it. And I'm taking Shamil in this fight. Like I said, I don't have a lot of film to watch on this one. I couldn't find a lot, and all I had were the 2 fights from Klidson. You might see a slight advantage from Abreu on the feet, actually, but I just think Gamzatov's going to be able to put the pressure on and put this fight where he wants to, and I just don't think that Abreu's jiu-jitsu is going to be enough to like submit Shamil and get him out of there. So I'm taking Shamil in this fight. Like I said, this is a guess. If I'd feel more confident in the pick if I had more like time to watch the fights or anything, but I didn't. So I couldn't find a whole lot. So this is what you got, unfortunately. I'm taking Shamil. I'm going to go decision like I said, man, I don't fucking know. But let's move on to the next fight, which I believe is taking place in the welterweight division. And it's between Ramazan Ameev, who is 18-3, and Anthony Rocco Martin, who is 16-5. And Martin's coming off of that. It was a majority decision to Damian Maia, and he got into positions in that fight where he was in trouble, but he would also shake Maia off and land some big shots. And in the 3rd round, he hurt Damian Maia pretty badly. So you got to almost, Damian Maia is such an expert that if you ever end up in his world, you almost have to take it like, yes, it's a loss on his record, but you also have to take it as like a moral victory that you were able to survive when he put you in dangerous situations, and then shake him off and hurt him. Put him in some bad spots, and a guy who, you got to feel confident if you did that to a guy who competed against the title at different points in his career, most recently against Tyron Woodley, right? And then you saw him submit Ben Askren. Like, got to feel good about this stuff. And also, Rocco Martin has a win over Sergio Moraes, who in 2008 actually defeated Kron Gracie at the World Championships, right? So another legit grappler, and taken down in that fight, but always worked his way back to the feet, attacking the low leg kicks a lot, just controlling the pace of the fight, man. Rocco Martin's a very impressive martial artist, and one of my favorite fights to watch was his right before he fought Sergio Moraes. Back in December of 2018, he fought Jake Matthews and caught him he caught him in an anaconda choke in the 3rd round. And, one of my critiques about him, though, is that he doesn't throw a lot of combinations, like 3 and 4 piece combinations. He throws a lot of like single shots, a lot of single leg kicks, and I think that you would really see Rocco Martin make a lot of strides in his game if he would string combinations together. And he'll do it once in a while. And when he does, he almost always connects. Like, there's one that I remember where he landed a nice body kick after following up. He followed the 1-2 up with a body kick, and it connected, man, and it looked good. And it's like, if you saw him implement that more regularly, I think he'd find a lot more success. But he fights out of a pretty wide stance, which, for a guy like Ameev, who is a little bit, and Rocco's going to be a little bit lighter on his feet than Ameev, right? A little more bouncing back and forth, whereas Ameev's going to be kind of like, he's going to be heavy on his feet, marching forward and trying to, pin him up against the cage and put this fight where he wants it. I think at range, Martin's going to have an advantage. But, if you look at Ameev, he'll hunt for the takedown, right? He's on a 7-fight winning streak right now, most recently over Stefan Sekulic. And he almost finished that fight in, I think, the first round. And Sekulic was kind of saved by the bell. And, you know, he one of the things that I picked up on when I was watching him fight is when he is getting taken down or when he is pressured or when he is in like a dangerous position, he's a big fan of the Kimura grip or the key lock, right? To get out of certain positions, which I love because I come from, well, I trained at Revolution for like 2 years, Revolution Jiu-Jitsu in Richmond, Virginia. And they're very big on the Kimura there. I mean, I was caught in it all the fucking time. And eventually you learn like how to, you know, either learn or just keep getting Kimura'd. But one of the things that I really liked about that is that it wasn't always just an attack for a submission. It was an attack to, I mean, that's a strong grip. And you can use it as an anchor to get to a lot of different positions. And he does that really well. He's not, just because he grabs the Kimura doesn't mean he's hunting for the submission. He's using it to gain an advantageous position. Like I said, kind of use that grip as an anchor to get to where he needs to be. It's good at shutting people down. And a lot of people don't know what to do except grab their leg to defend when you do it. So it gives you, they're worried about defending the Kimura, and it gives you opportunities to advance your position or get out of a dangerous position, right? I'm a big fan of the Kimura grip. I love it. But anyway, before the fight with Sekulic, and he's exemplified that Kimura grip in a lot of his fights that I've seen. He beat Alberto Mina before that. And one of the things that I like about Ameev, and one of the things that might be important when you look at this fight, is the fact that when Ameev pushes forward, he will throw 3 or 4 punch combinations. So if he's pressuring forward into Martin, and Martin's only throwing 1 punch at a time, but he's following up and pressuring with combos, you might see him land. Ameev is also a guy who has a win over Sam Alvey, which is weird, right? Because we're talking about a welterweight fight here. And I think that was his UFC debut, was against Sam Alvey. And that's a hard fight to look at and take anything away from, though, right? Because Sam Alvey, that fight took place at middleweight. This fight is taking place at 170. Ameev was clearly way smaller than Alvey, but Alvey missed weight for that fight and ended up moving up to 205 in the very next fight. And I think that Alvey was very depleted in that fight. He just didn't look like Sam Alvey always walks backwards and looks for the counter, and he's not exactly the guy who's marching you forward throwing a ton of volume, right? But he looked flat-footed in that fight and just looked like he didn't really want to be there. So hard to take anything away from that fight. But like I said, this guy, again, man, from Dagestan, right? 7 submission wins, 3 by knockout. This is a good fight. I'm taking Martin just because I expect Martin to be able to control the range a little bit better. But Martin is going to get into trouble if he lets himself, A, get pushed up against the cage, or if he is only throwing 1 or 2 punch combinations and getting caught in the pocket and Ameev's following up with 3, 4, 5 punch combinations. I think you'll see Martin get, and that'll start to like set up the takedown too. So, I mean, like I said, Martin is legit on the ground. He's very good everywhere. That's why I'm taking him in this fight. And I like his odds of controlling the range, but I would like to see him throw a few more combos. I think you're going to have to see him mix things up too. He can't just be going to the head and the body. He's got to be throwing in leg kicks, you know, changing levels, man. Got to do it. But I'm taking Martin in this fight. Not really sure by the method. I think these are 2 tough motherfuckers. I think you're going to see it go to a decision. All right. The next fight is between Kattar Ibragimov and Ed Herman. And Ed Herman is a true veteran of the sport, man. 24, 14-1. Most recently knocked out Patrick Cummins. Lost a split decision to John Vellante before that. And they got into a real slugfest. And he just he was upset about the decision when the fight ended. But man, when shit like that happens, when you get into a fight like that, and you know if it goes to the judges, it can swing either way. I would have to go back and really judge that fight. Like, I would have to watch that fight and try to watch it and be a judge in order to really get a determination of who I thought won. When I watch that, I almost enjoy it too much as a fan to really be caring about who's winning, right? You're just watching a slugfest. But before that, he lost to CB Dalloway, and that fight to me just came down to some grappling transitions, right? Like Dalloway was just a little bit ahead, a little bit more polished in the grappling department. So this is tough because again, this Kattar I'm going to call him Ibragimov. Because I'm probably fucking his whole name up, but I'd rather fuck one part of his name up than both. So Ibragimov is a guy who gets a fight with Da Un Jung, right? This is back in August of this year, and he comes out throwing bombs. Like he's going for the fucking finish right away, and he was landing some nice shots that might have knocked a normal man out. But Da Eun-jung just walked through it, right? Kept the pace, and he kept a steady, consistent pace throughout the entire fight. And Ibragimov was just, I mean, throwing everything he had into it all the time. And I was thinking about this when I was watching the fight. It's weird how when you lean on your power early in a fight and kind of drain yourself of energy, power is almost the only thing that you have left to finish a fight. Because instead of like focusing on settling down, using solid technique and pacing yourself, now you got to wing shots to finish it because you have no energy left. And it's just like the cycle where you keep depleting yourself and you keep winging shots and you just keep getting more and more tired. And I think that's what you saw happen to Ibragimov in this fight because he got guillotined in the third round, and it was a fight that if it goes to the judges, he might have won. I don't know. Maybe a draw, he might have won. I don't know, but he got caught in a guillotine and it ended, right? So to me, that being his first fight in the UFC, that looked like octagon jitters to me, right? Like just going out and I don't even know if I want to call it jitters, but yeah, kind of jitters. Like going out and trying to you're trying to put the fight away right now. And in the UFC, man, that might work. And this guy has like a lot of finishes, right? 2 knockouts, 3 submissions, and his only loss, like I said, was his UFC debut. So he might be used to bullying people like that around on like a lower level, but when you get to the UFC, everyone is legit, man, and you got to pace yourself and be smart about what you're doing. And the only thing I like what I see out of Ibragimov, though, man. He's got a lot of heart. He's got some great finishes on his record, right? Like he's obviously a prospect, but the thing that scares me is that Ed Herman is a black belt, and he is a veteran. He's 24, 14, and 1. I mean, you're talking about like 30, what is that, 39 fights right there? That's a lot of pro fights to have, man, versus a guy who only has 9 on his resume. So I think that I think you'll see Ibragimov pace himself a little bit more, but for me, Herman has to drag this thing into deep water. And, Herman has some legit submission attempts and stuff, man. You're talking about a guy who, like I said, he's been around the fight game for forever. There's not a whole lot of positions that he hasn't been putting in his career. So if this fight starts getting a little bit ugly and into some deeper water, I'm going to give it to Herman. But I don't know. It's going to be one of those things where like you saw such a strong performance out of Ibragimov in the first round of that UFC fight, his UFC debut, that what if he can just tone it down and kind of pace himself and be selective about his shots and be smart. I think that's going to be a point of emphasis for him in this fight. And if he follows that game plan, it's kind of hard to tell what we're going to see. He might go out and look fucking brilliant, but just based off experience and what I have to look at, I'm taking Herman. Just man, it's like youth versus experience, and I'm almost always a fan of experience. And a lot of the times I'm wrong. Like sometimes you do get these surgeon guys who come up and just put an ass beating on some of these guys who are very, tenured. But I don't know. I just got a feeling Herman's going to pull it off. But I'm excited to see what we're going to get out of Ibragimov and what his development looks like since his last fight. So it's going to be interesting. All right. And the next fight, this is a really good fight. I'm excited for this. I think this is a middleweight bout between. No, I think I got this written down wrong. I think this is going to be a lightweight fight, right? Zaleem Imadaev versus Danny Roberts. And Zaleem Imadaev is a guy who, if you go and watch his highlight reel, he's a scary motherfucker. He has his footwork is really nice. He's got some crazy strikes. He's really smooth on his feet, a lot of spinning attacks, and he's knocked some guys out with some like spinning back fists. He's good. He's got like I watched one of his fights over in FMG and Fight Nights Global, and he knocked the guy out in like 10 seconds. He pressured him up against the cage. Like the guy came at him and pressured him hard, and he just found the opening and boom, dropped him. Fight's over. And that was against Yuri Izatov, I think. No, that was against Ivan Gluhawk. Yuri Izatov was the spinning back fist one that I watched. It was a knockout. But anyway, he debuted for the UFC back in April for the first time. Obviously debut, right? Anyway, he fought Max Griffin, and he lost a majority decision. And one of the things that I saw was in the first round, Griffin was really able to impose his will in the grappling department. Then you kind of saw it die out, and the advantage clearly went to Imadaev on the feet. But some things that Griffin found success with was just coming straight down the pipe with punches. Like he's kind of throwing some wild stuff, and he's good at landing it, and he sets it up well and everything like that. But it was a little bit predictable in this fight, and I think that probably comes from a little bit of the frustration from the first round. And Griffin fought a good fight, man, pretty grappling heavy, and you got to see though that Imadaev is not a slouch on the ground at all. He can hang down there, you know, and he knows what he's doing. He just prefers to keep it on the feet. But I think that Max Griffin fight was it showed a few holes, right? First, you can control him on the ground. Like I think Griffin burned himself out from trying so hard to keep the fight in that category, though, which says something about Imadaev's resiliency. But like I said, Griffin coming down the pipe with those like straight punches, those paid some dividends. And Danny Roberts has a professional background in boxing. I think he's like 3-1. And I know that's not anything to like get overly excited about, but he understands the fundamentals of boxing, and that might be a good counter to some of the wild stuff that you're going to see from Zaleem. So Danny Roberts, though, went out there and fought a guy who has a pretty wild striking style, Michel Pereira, in his last fight, and he got knocked out. And Pereira is just like, when you watch him, he's just like bouncing off. He's a scary motherfucker to just look at, right? He just looks like a savage, like this big athletic motherfucking, I don't know. I don't want to bump into that guy anywhere really. But so you see him kind of struggle with explosiveness, right? And I think that Zaleem's technique is going to be a little bit more refined than Michel's. And I think it's going to give Danny Roberts some trouble. One thing to like look at though is the fact that in Danny Roberts' fight before that, he fought Claudio Silva, and Claudio Silva is a legit jiu-jitsu black belt, and he got armbarred, but it was a weird call because like he yelled out in pain, and if you look at the angle on the camera, it does look like his arm does something funky, and I think the ref thought that he broke his arm and yelled out in pain because of it. But really, the position that he ended up landing in was favorable for him to escape the armbar. And for a lot of that round, man, I mean, he was getting into some good grappling transitions with Claudio Silva, you know? He was able to reverse some bad positions. It just ended with a tough call. And I'm not saying that I don't know if he would have gone on to won that fight. He looked good though, man. And Danny Roberts, like I said, he's a very talented striker. He's good on the ground. He got to show that against like a legit black belt. So I would say that the path to success for Danny Roberts would be pressuring forward, putting the pressure on him, keeping his back against the cage, and then mixing in the takedowns and making sure your cardio is up to snuff. If you're having trouble controlling the fight and keeping this guy where you want to take him, it's going to be a long night for you, because then he's going to be able to implement his game plan and push you back and, you know, control the footwork battle. But I think if Danny Roberts sticks to some fundamentals, pushes forward, and like I said, mix it, you got to keep this guy guessing. If you just get into a pure striking battle with this guy, I think you're going to have a long fucking night. He's good, man. He's very good. And I know you see a lot of that fancy stuff, but that's probably because he finds openings. It's not like he doesn't know how to just have a regular fucking fist fight, right? So mixing in takedowns is going to be important. I'm taking Zaleem in this fight, though. I think it's going to be a tough task for Danny Roberts to drag this guy to the ground. I think he's going to be surprised at how strong he is in the clinch. And I think I think that's going to end up work. Like we talked about what Danny Roberts has to do. I think it's going to end up working in Zaleem's favor though, because if Roberts isn't able to get that fight to the ground or successfully land some takedowns, Zaleem's going to be able to start to transition the fight into his world. And I think you'll start to see him take over there, maybe earn a knockout. I also just don't like the fact that Zaleem is coming off of his UFC debut, and it was a tough fight against a tough guy in Max Griffin. And I don't like the fact that Danny Roberts is coming off a knockout loss against a guy, and now he's going to be fighting a guy who his expertise is in striking. That makes me a little nervous. Not that there are paths to victory for Danny Roberts in this fight. This is a good fucking fight. And also, we talked about experience. This is Zaleem's 9th professional fight. This is going to be Danny Roberts' 22nd. This will be Zaleem's 10th, pardon me. So things to keep in mind, man. And I think, it's also going to be footwork is going to be very important, because Danny Roberts is a southpaw and Zaleem is going to be fighting orthodox. So whoever's winning that lead foot position, whoever's getting outside, right, and doing better work, setting stuff up with their feet, is probably going to come out victorious in this one. Like I said, it's a tall task for Danny Roberts, but I do think there are paths to victory. All right, the co-headliner. For whatever Greg Hardy has been through and whatever he's done throughout his career, right, you got to give him credit for stepping up to fight the number 7 ranked guy in the world. I mean, Alexander Volkov is 30-7, 37 professional fights versus Greg Hardy's 7. He's got 30 more fights than him. And he's a former Bellator champion and a former M1 champion. He put Derek Lewis in trouble. Granted, he lost to him with that, like, he got knocked out in the last 10 seconds of the third round. I think that was on the McGregor and Habib card. But knocked out Fabricio Verdum in the fourth, knocked out Stefan Struve in the third. This guy has a long resume, and he's fighting a guy in Greg Hardy who really has only fought in emerging talent, like from the Contender Series. Hardy's a big boy, and he looked much improved when he fought Ben Sassoli recently. I liked his footwork. I liked the way he was snapping leg kicks in there. But if I got to pick someone, I just got to be honest, man. Alexander Volkov is a tall task. If Greg Hardy goes out and beats Alexander Volkov, I will be extremely surprised and impressed. I mean, but I just think that Volkov is so long. I don't think that Hardy has dealt with anyone that is anywhere near the talent level, that has any of the weapons in his arsenal that Alexander Volkov has. He's going to be dealing with kicks. He's going to be dealing with a lot of things, man. You're talking about a guy who also survived on the bottom against Fabricio Verdum in grappling situations. Like, Volkov is a true veteran of the sport and one of the, before knocked out by Derek Lewis, on a real title run in the heavyweight division. So I just think that with his length and the weapons and just I think it's going to be overwhelming for Hardy. I think you're going to see him look confused and probably get finished in this fight. Paths to victory for Hardy are difficult because he's so green, right? Like, you saw too, like, Hardy's not comfortable throwing combinations necessarily. Like, he's not going to go out and throw this crisp, clean 4 or 5 punch combination and then follow it up. But you know what I mean? It's not all flowing together yet like that. And for Volkov, this shit is muscle memory. He's doing this all the goddamn time. He's been doing this for years. So I think that you're really going to see that shine through. I think you're going to see a gap in elite level competition and Greg Hardy level competition, like that UFC contender. Not that Greg Hardy can't get better or that he can't be a threat at some point. This is just a massive leap. And it's hard for me to pick Hardy. Like I said, if he does, he's also a heavyweight though. And you got to remember that heavyweights have legit knockout power and can end the fight at any time. So if he lands, I mean, fuck, who knows, right? But I also think that you started to see Hardy fade a little bit towards the end of the second round. Obviously, the inhaler incident, right? He took a hit of the inhaler. I think he has like asthma or something. So going against a guy who has gone 5 rounds multiple times in his career, like went into the fourth with Fabricio Verdum, this is tough. This is tough to pick Hardy in this fight. I don't think he's going to come out on top in this one. I think he's going to get finished for the first time in his career. But let's move on to the main event, which is what, I mean, this is a great fucking fight. You've got number 5 ranked Zabit Magomedsharipov, who's 17-1, fighting number 11 Calvin Kattar. And this is a featherweight clash between 2 of the most promising prospects in the UFC, 100%. And Zabit is coming off that unanimous decision win over Jeremy Stephens. And I like that fight because you got to see how Zabit dealt with a true veteran of the sport and Jeremy Stephens. Like his last win before that, Brandon Davis. Still a little green, promising guy, right? But green. Caught him in that Suluev stretch. Am I pronouncing that right? Probably fucking not. But, you know, he was on his back, climbed over, and stretched that hamstring out, man. There's a ton of pressure on that. And a beautiful performance from him. But Jeremy Stephens is the most impressive one of his career just because Jeremy's one of those guys who has legit knockout power, and he pressures forward all the time. So when you see Zabit deal with that, and just he's not afraid to stand in the pocket with guys. You saw that in the Bochniak fight. But again, what you saw in the Bochniak fight was a one-dimensional fighter who was mainly throwing his hands, and Zabit has a full arsenal. So when you got Stephens, don't get me wrong, he relies on his power, but he's a little bit more of a complete fighter than Bochniak. So that to me was, but here's one thing that I've noticed about Zabit. One of my only critiques about him, he starts to fade a little bit towards, like, especially in the third round, he gets a little tired. And there were several points in the Jeremy Stephens fight where you caught him looking up at the clock. And at the end of the Kyle Bochniak fight, he was looking a little exhausted, man. So if this fight goes into the 4th and 5th rounds, I think Calvin Kattar's gone to the 5th round one time in his career. That's going to be something interesting to pay attention to. How much emphasis do they have on cardio? Because there's a very good possibility this fight goes all 5 rounds. These are 2 very good guys, and 2 guys who aren't just good at implementing offense, but are good at defending themselves. And Zabit, I mean, you're talking about a lot of experience between these 2 guys too. Calvin Kattar started fighting in 2003. or no, his professional debut was in 2007. So he made his pro debut 12 years ago, right? Meanwhile, Zabit made his professional debut in MMA 5 years later, but he spent like 10 years living in a boarding school training wushu, which is like what I'm not positive, but I think it's like a form of kung fu. Somebody could probably educate me on that a little bit more. If you guys know, drop something in the comments about like what it is and what the differences between that and kung fu are. But my point is that both of these guys have a lifetime of martial arts experience, right? They're both, I mean, students of the game. They're both very technical. And Calvin Kattar, I mean, ranked number 11, coming off that knockout win over Ricardo Lamas, beat Chris Fishgold before that in the first round, 2 first-round KOs in a row. One thing that I want to point out, though, and this is the main reason that I'm going to take Zabit in this fight. When Calvin Kattar fought Renato Moicano, first off, Calvin is he's primarily he fights out of a boxing stance a lot, and not that he can't throw kicks, and not that he doesn't mix things up, but he's really good with his hands. And I think you saw when he fought Moicano, a guy who switches stances a lot and stuff, and is able to get into better positions. He struggled with that a little bit, and Zabit switches stances very fluidly. And you know what? So I would expect Zabit might have a little bit of, and Zabit's also very good on the ground. You know, he's got a very large array of submissions that he can pull out, and he's good at controlling. He's good at staying on top of you, applying pressure and controlling the position. So, oh man, this is a great fight, and I love Calvin Kattar, but I just think that Zabit is going to be a little bit too much for him, a little bit too much going on, a little bit too much in the footwork department, a little bit too much. I think it's going to be a really good fight. I think this is probably your fight of the night, especially if it goes all 5 rounds. Both guys like to get after it, but like I said earlier, I want to come back to this. The one thing that I'm looking for is what if this fight goes into like I said, I think there's a good possibility that this fight just goes into deep water because both guys have so much experience, not only fighting, but defending themselves. Like that's important. That's half of fighting, you know what I mean? So if this fight goes in to deep water, is Calvin Kattar maybe going to be able to turn the tide and put some pressure on him and start doing a little bit of what Kyle Bochniak did, except for the next 2 rounds? If so, you might see Calvin Kattar get a 4th or 5th round finish from this. I would say, if I had to take a guess, right, and this is all guesswork, don't take anything I'm fucking saying too seriously. I don't even know what the fuck I'm talking about, right? But I would say that if the finish is going to come for Zabit, it's going to come between rounds 1 and 3, and if it comes for Kattar, it's going to be between rounds 4 and 5, just based off what I've seen. Obviously, Zabit can make improvements in the conditioning department. Kattar can make he's probably it's not like he's just going to go in and fight Zabit. Like he's obviously preparing for him, right? So it's going to be interesting, but I would imagine that Zabit will have the advantage early on. And as the fight starts to wear into deep water, Calvin Kattar might start to take over. But I'm taking Zabit in this fight. I think he'll get it done probably in the 3rd round. And man, I've gone back and forth about this fight a lot just because, like I said, the potential for it to go the whole way is very good. There's a lot of different ways this fight could go because you're talking about 2 guys with an extremely deep skill set. So I'm excited for this one, man, but I'm taking Zabit 3rd round finish. I don't really know how. He can get it done in so many ways. It almost seems foolish to try to predict exactly how he's going to pull it off. Starts going past the 3rd round, look for Calvin Kattar to start taking over and maybe finish things in the 4th or 5th. But I think that's all I got for today, guys. So thank you for tuning in. Give us a follow on Instagram. We're at MMA.analysis. Hit the subscription button if you liked it. Subscribe to the channel. Give us a thumbs up or a thumbs down. You know, you're adults. You can make your own fucking decisions about whether you liked it or not. Leave comments. Let me know what you guys think about the fights coming up tomorrow night. And there's also a Bellator fight going on tonight. I think John Salter's on it too. So I'll probably tune into that and watch that. But yeah, like I said, leave a comment, leave a like, subscribe, blah, 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 all that good shit. Thank you for tuning in, and bye-bye.